that era, you guys were really into engines.
Well, we had to fix things. You had carburetors that could be fixed. This was the era before electronics. Now, if something goes wrong with your car, you plug a computer in, it tells you what's wrong with it, you take the part off, throw it in a trash can, and get another one that has to be built by the factory. You can't used to sit around and change the jets in your carburetor, change the rear end gears, change the compression ratio, build your hot rods. You know, that's still a big industry. People, the golden era of the automobile from 1930 till 1970, I guess, before emissions and safety became such an important part of it. But all us kids could fix cars and work on them. And I understood airplane engines a little bit when I was 15 years old. And you knew the inline engines, the Allisons, the Rolls-Royce Merlins, the radial engines, the different types of engines. Everybody knew all the kids knew stuff like that back in my day, and now a jet engine's a jet engine. Just how big an impeller you got is the only difference in the different jet engines. So there's nothing for kids to work on anymore. Nothing for you to learn on. It's all electronic now.
When people get on an airplane, they just take it for granted. All the people that put those things over the pioneers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you think of any fun moments that you had with John Myers, or special magical moments in your mind that were special to you and to him?
There were so many of them. It was the relationship, the interfacing between he and Bob Hoover and Chuck Yeager and Wally Schirra and the way I never looked on John as a comedian or the funny instance that happened, because his aviation career outside of his flying his helicopter and his jet was over by the time we went to Oshkosh probably 15 times together, and he'd get on the airplane and he wouldn't say a word unless somebody said something to him all the way to Oshkosh. That's the kind of quiet guy he was in his elder years. He just didn't say a lot. So I can't remember of any particular.
You said that he loved his country. Did you ever talk about that much?
No, but he didn't talk about it a lot. But he and Barron and Dolly Cole and all of them that were very interested in the Smithsonian, the history of this country as far as aviation and machinery, and I know that he gave a lot of money to the Smithsonian, and I know that he loved his country because we used to talk about it all the time. Well, all of us love our country. What this country stood for, to me, is one of the miracles of civilization.
Do you think it's important for people to hear these stories of history, and because kids don't really care about history as much anymore?
Well, that's one of the reasons I'm so glad you're doing this on John, because without this, John might be forgotten, and this will carry John on for the next 100 years. There will be people seeing and viewing this, and they'll understand what John Myers stood for, which is what I'm lucky enough to have known him to understand.
We talked to some young pilots, and they said that pilots and people they know who John Myers was.
Oh, every pilot knew who John Myers was. There's not a single person that was really interested in aviation that didn't know of John Myers.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time.
Okay.
Do you remember John Myers?
Well, I remember John Myers, yes, very much so.
If somebody says to you, who was John Myers, what would you say?
John Myers was my inspiration for flying. I met him at Baron Hilton's ranch and had a long chat with him about flying, and he was telling me some stories, and he said, "Why don't you fly?" I said, oh, no, I don't think so. And he said, no, you should fly. You're a smart girl. He said, you should fly. I think you should fly. And he was so, he got you excited.
Like there's nothing to it.
Yeah, he had this passion that it infected you. And I'm going, really? And then I started to get interested in flying. And I thought, I will become a pilot. I will do that. And it's tough when you're older to learn. You've got these young people that you're studying with. And John said, "How's it going?" I said, "Oh, ground school's coming to an end shortly, hopefully, and I'll be up there." He said, "Well, don't lose it. You just come every time you go down Rodeo Drive shopping." He said, "You call into me and we'll have a little chat." So I did. And he'd keep my spirits up. So I don't know. He said, "No, you can do it. Come along. I'm proud of you." He said, "I know you're going to make it." Of course, when he said that, you can't not make it, can you? Because I didn't want to let him down. So I did, and I qualified as a pilot. And John was he's a quintessential English gentleman. And I told him that. I said, I can find gentlemen like you down in clubs in St James's in London. He said, really? I'm a little cravat he used to wear. He was very much an English gentleman. He was just the most wonderful person. And it's funny, that Christmas that Carroll was talking about, he'd rung up a few months earlier, and I'd ordered the new Bentley Continental GT when it first came out. Because of Carroll's name, I was kind of one of the first to get one. So John rang me up. He said, "I want the Bentley Continental GT." I said, "You've got 2 Bentleys already, John." No. I want that one. It's fast. John with fast cars. So I said, "Well, okay, if Drew's our names, you can get it." Anyway, he rang me just before Chris. He said, "Cleo, I've got it. I've got the car. It's beautiful and I love it." Well, at that time, Carroll said to me, "Well, I've got something bad news for you. You can't take delivery of yours. It's there, but you can't have it." He said, "I'm with Ford now." He said, "and it really should be a Ford car." So I was very disappointed. So I rang John up.
That created a big problem in this household.
So I rang John up. I said, "John, do you like your Bentley?" He said, "Oh, I love it. It's wonderful." I said, "John, what are you doing for Christmas?" And he said, "Oh, I'm not doing anything." I said, "Would you like to spend Christmas with us, John?" He said, "Yes, I'd love to. I'll come." I said, No, John. I'll come down to you with my Shelby and we'll do an exchange and I'll take your Bentley." I thought, I'm going to drive a Bentley on Christmas Day, whatever. So John was really good. He said, "Okay." And he just sat in the passenger seat. I said, and we were zipping around these roads up here. And then Carroll drove the car back to John's later on that day. But I thought, well, I got to drive one that day. It's thanks to John that I drove one. But John was such fun. But I remember the Christmas my daughter was over from England. See, and it's another side of John that I didn't know. She was talking to him, and she plays polo in England and in America. And he said, "Oh, I played polo." She said, "Oh, you played polo?" He said, "Oh, I was just 2 goals." And she went, "Really? Tell me more." And she was like, "Woof." I said, "John, I never knew you played polo." "Oh, yes, I played polo." It was
That's the way he was.
And just my daughter then, he just got her, and she was like, and they just talked polo. I mean, there's sides to John that you didn't know. And I remember once we were flying up to Baron Hilton's ranch. No, it was John's ranch, Merced, and it was his birthday, his 90th birthday. And we got on, I was co-pilot on, I think, it's either Clay Lacey or Baron Hilton's jet. And I was talking to air control, and he said, "What are all these jets doing flying into the Flying M ranch at Merced?" I said, "Well, it's John Myers' 90th birthday." He said, "Not the John Myers, it's air control." So I said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, please wish him happy birthday from the whole of the air control here." And it was just everybody loved John. I hadn't heard anything negative.
I never heard one negative word about John in the short time that I knew him.
That's great. The John Myers, they said. Yeah.
It's just a wonderful man. Just.
How do you think you're going to remember John?
Gentleman John. Yes. I remember John because he was my inspiration. I wouldn't be a pilot, really, without his inspiration, him.
I remember you talking to him one time. There was John Myers, Clay Lacey, Bob Hoover, Chuck Yeager, Wally Schirra standing around the bar one night, and Cleo had just gotten her instrument rating. And that's a very difficult thing to get now because FAA really doesn't want anybody, they don't want any more pilots. They'd get rid of 90% of them if they could. And John Myers says, that's wonderful. You know, sitting here, none of us guys could pass the instrument exam of the FAA now. In fact, none of us could get a pilot's license if we had to pass the written. And I thought, here are the greatest pilots in the world, and they've got this thing so screwed up that they admit that they couldn't get their pilot's license if they had to go take the test today. Isn't that a wonderful story?
It's amazing. It's like we interviewed Bob for his video about all that dealing he had with the FAA. It's just amazing. Disgrace.
They did, though. They came and apologized to him. We had a get-together at Baron Hilton's house, and 2 or 3 of the guys that ran the FAA came and presented him a certificate apologizing for the appalling things that went on over this.
Yeah, that was just an amazing situation.
I was very happy about that. At least they were upfront about that.
If you were going to describe John Myers, just like 2 or 3 words, which words would you choose?
It's hard to. Perfect gentleman.
Absolutely.
He had so many interests that you can't pinpoint any one thing. Like polo, like he loved his speedboats. He loved his ranching. He loved his aviation. He never forgot that he was a lawyer.
I remember once when we were out, we were on the freeway, and this car zapped by us. It was a Corvette with him, and he had a hood on, a kind of a goggles or something on Gus's head. And he goes, "Hi guys," and he's like, "Phew," and it was. Do you remember that time?
Yeah.
It was so. He was always. I remember that well.
He's always going 90 miles an hour up until way after he's 90 years old.
They said he had a few nicknames. He called himself Skinhead or something.
Oh yeah, he bald early. Yeah, he was bald in 1941 when I saw him climb out of that flying wing at Randolph Field in Texas.
Did he ever tell you any stories about Howard Hughes?
Yeah, he said Howard Hughes used to call him all the time, day and night, and he had to go out to Edwards to fly one morning, and Howard called about midnight or something, and Mrs. Myers says, "Mr. Hughes, I'd like for you to call my husband earlier." Says he has to work tomorrow morning, and said, "I never heard from Howard again."
They say that a person's character comes out more during tough times versus the easygoing times. Can you talk about his character?
I never lived with him through what 1988 was a bad recession, but I never heard him gripe about it, so I never experienced that with him.
Did you know his wife and all?
No, I met her, but I didn't know her well. She passed away shortly after John and I became friends.
Now, a couple people I've talked to used the term "friends for life." Was that the kind of guy he was?
Oh, absolutely.
Well,
absolutely.
That's the people that when you hear John Myers talk about his friendship with Donald Douglas, Northrop, the people that were the foundation of aviation in this country, he knew them all, and he knew them all his life.
Wonderful man. It's a man that you won't forget. You know, once you met him, he has an impact on you.
Oh, absolutely. No, we'll never forget John Myers.
No, wish you could clone him.
Don't want to forget him because there's so many special moments with him. Can't recall them all.
So many.
Now, some of the pictures we see him, he does like wearing scarves and things like that. Was he sort of a dapper type of guy?
He dressed very well.
He did. He reminded me so much of an English. Come from England, he was just so much like an English gentleman, and I told him that.
Except he wore out cowboy boots.
Oh yes, he wore his cowboy boots. That was it.
Yeah, he was a cowboy. He loved his cattle ranch.
Yeah.
Now we know what he drank, the Yum Yum. Did he have any favorite meals or things that he liked, or desserts or anything?
I don't remember.